saying men should be dangerous. By dangerous, that implies I should be ready to threaten someone, to hurt somebody.
No, you should be capable of it. There's nothing to you otherwise.
Welcome to the Dangerous Man Podcast, where we talk about how to become a better man, take responsibility for our mission, create value for others, and the many failures and lessons we've learned along the way. Stay dangerous. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Dangerous Man Podcast. This is your host, John Kostohris, joined by co-host
Adam Thooft. What's up?
Well, good morning, my dear friend Adam. And
Good morning.
you know, I I was gonna go for a run yesterday, and my body was like, I do this thing where I work 6 days a week, right? And I try to get a shit ton done, and then on Sunday I just kind of and I rest, and I
Just gonna crash
and sleep and do leisure activities and get ready for another week to get at it. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of comical if you would have been at my house yesterday. I'd been like, just like really out of it and like not wanting to be around people, just wanting to get some rest. But alas, I have slept well, and I've arisen victorious for another week.
So instead of going for a run, you took a nap.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, so, which I do slightly regret, and I'm gonna have to get my run in today. That means.
Yeah.
So there's a trade-off, but it got me thinking though. I was like, yesterday I was kind of doing some research on marathon running because I'm training for a marathon that I'm going to run in October. Hence the run I needed to go on. I need to go on a longer run every week and kind of gradually push the miles up. And yeah, it's craziness.
Oh, yeah.
But it's awesome and challenging. But I was, reading about like marathon runners that are like pretty dang good run 3 hours or less, 26.2 miles in 3 hours or less.
How?
I don't know paces.
Okay.
So don't Adam's the math guy over here, so he's always trying to get it in his head. But
And John's going, don't at me.
don't ask me. Yeah. But I could tell you a little bit more about. I think the average man who runs a marathon runs about, I think it was 4 hours and 4 minutes. And so they were basically saying to run a 4 hour or less marathon. Yeah, so about 4 hours. That is above average and above like most, you know what I mean? Like everybody average or below that runs marathons. It was basically like you'll run a marathon like 3 to 5 hours typically. Yeah. And most people do it around a little after 4. And so they're saying if you break 4, that's kind of a big deal if you're kind of new to the game.
So if you do under 4, you gotta go at like, every mile has to take you 10 minutes, basically.
I think it's like 9. I think it's 9 minutes. Maybe I'm wrong. I was reading on it.
For 4 hours? Wait.
Yeah. Let's do the calculators.
Hold on, so.
Actually, I don't know how to do the calculators. Adam's the math guy.
Yeah, I was supposed to say, like, okay. Head math right now.
Like, that's cool, John. But I don't even know what to divide what into.
Because it's roughly, it's 23 point something miles, right?
26.2.
Oh, it's 26. Okay, that throws all the math off. That's what I was.
Yeah,
I thought it was 24. That's why I'm not a marathon runner.
If you are back home and you are listening, you can use the power. You too can use the power of the Googles and find this answer.
Or the calculators.
Yeah, if you're smarter than I at setting up your equation, then go for it. Now, I am good at pushing buttons, so tell me what to do and we'll build a house or something. But no, it got me thinking though about training, right? And it's a fascinating subject to me because I 2 years ago, I think I mentioned a couple of times, but I did a through hike, which is when you take a long distance hiking trail, and I think long distance is considered about 100-mile plus
For hiking.
for hiking. Yeah, typically, and then give or take a bit, but that's kind of the measuring stick. Now, most like esteemed through hikes are, several hundred miles. A lot like the biggest trails people would think of is the Appalachian Trail in the Appalachian Mountains, which spans from Maine to Georgia. It's like 2,800 miles.
Okay.
And then Pacific Crest on the west coast goes through the Sierra Nevada mountains, Mexico to Canada. That's like 3,200 something miles, and the Continental Divide, which I think is like 3,400 miles, goes through the Rockies, Canada, Mexico.
Wow.
Kind of the Triple Crown hikes where you do them all in your Triple Crown, and it's just considered you're basically a badass hiker if you've done those three, And it's like a 3 to 5 month like voyage where it's not like, like if you over your life you hike all of it little by little, you just like take a weekend off. And it's like, no, like a through hike is when you get on the trail and you start at either the north or the south, or if it's the east-west trail, whatever. You start at one of the terminuses, the beginning point, and you hike the whole entire trail to the other terminus, the end point. And then
in one stint.
Basically. In one go. And it is debated, but some people are like, well, if you get injured and you have to come off even for like a couple weeks and then get back on just so you can, is that cool? Like, it's kind of debated whether that's all right or not. I think I've seen people have to take a little recovery on like a micro injury that got bad, and then they had to like sit in like a motel on trail for a couple weeks and pay for a bunch of nights to recover. And I kept going. It's like, based on the research I've done, it's like, yeah, that's not too bad. It's not ideal, but like if you're on trail, it's like totally. But like if you have to get off trail and go home for a bit, it's like,
Yeah. So like as long as
you kind of failed and you got to start over.
It's kind of like,
from what I've kind of read,
if you stayed on the trail the whole time, in on the course of the trail, and you just stayed at like some of the towns along the way for longer periods of time.
Yeah.
It still counts.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, so on trail from start to finish. That's what. And so then it's kind of a feat, because if those who aren't familiar with through hiking, there's a lot to it. I might not go into all of it, but there's essentially like, okay, well, John, like, what do you do to hike a through hike? And it's like, well, there's a lot of aspects I could get into. Realistically, like, I want to hike some of these trails, and I'd love to like write a book one day. And I already learned a ton about through hiking. I've done a 310-mile through hike solo by myself. It was the Superior Hiking Trail, which is like Canada to just past Duluth, Minnesota, which is like right on the edge of Lake Superior. Duluth is. So you have this whole shoreline, north shoreline of one of the Great Lakes, Lake Superior in Minnesota. And basically the trail kind of goes through the little hills and mountains and beach lines and forests along that, and some awesome overlooks and fall colors when I was there. And I could tell so many stories. We'd have 100 episodes on me telling stories. Like there's so much that happens, and I did it in 18 days. So 16 full days of hiking, 2 half days. And it was epic, man. And I finished. I conquered it. And
oh yeah.
And I'm actually talking about going back and doing it again. Now that you could call me an expert guide on that trail, because I've done every single inch of that trail. But me and a buddy might be picking another spot. But I think what's cool to me about hiking, I mean, there's so much that's cool about hiking. It's like just being in the wilderness, being outdoors, having to fall back on like, it's like, okay, yeah, I have my phone on me and I have a lot of tools. That's for sure. And we have like maps and whatnot. Whether you do paper maps or a lot of through hikers, it's not like you're always navigating complex trails. It's usually like one main trail and you stick to it. It just becomes a matter of like, did I train well enough that I can actually do 20 to 40 miles a day hiking? Can I carry the weight? Do I know what to do when it's windy and rainy? What happens if water gets in my tent? Like, what if I have to set up my tent in the wind and the rain, which I had to do once, and I figured it out. So we made it, and with minimal water intact. But there's difference, where do you put your food so like bears or mice don't get it, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you get good enough sleep that you can go and walk 30 miles a day? It's just like a lot of, there's a lot of challenges particular to a through hike that are interesting. But it was, it kind of got me thinking though, getting back onto like, a training topic.
You can tell John really loves hiking.
Yeah. I'm cutting off the temptation to go in a gazillion different directions with this podcast.
But then we'd see you on like episode 140 by the time he's done talking about it. So
yeah, and there's so much that relates to, I think, being a man that is anyways, it's exhilarating. But I was particularly thinking about training, and I wanted to talk about training. And I can tell you what I did, but I was basically, this was a couple years ago. I spent probably like a whole year just like looking up YouTubers that were through hikers that had done the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, and just a bunch of other trails, Arizona Trail. And I watched a ton of their YouTube vlogs and YouTube videos. And it's cool because I was trying to learn like, okay, like what do I do? How do I do this trail? Like what gear do I need? Like, how do I need to train? Like, how do I carry food the whole way? It's like, well, if you're curious about that topic, come back later to hear the answer. But it involves carrying not food for the whole entire trail.
yeah,
but
you don't carry a month's worth of food for the entire trail.
It would be 3 months, but yeah, no, you can
a
only
couple days
carry
at a
what
time.
fits in your pack, and you gotta pick up more along the way. So there's different strategies to resupply. But for training, it was like a lot of guys, and I alluded to this earlier, but like what happens if you get off the trail for an injury, like is it considered that you completed, right? We were talking about that.
Yeah.
I want to hop in right back in there. It was like, well, a lot of people actually don't think that constitutes as a complete. And so it was like, wow, like realistically, like a lot of the hikes I've been on, and maybe other people are like, I'm not a hiker. I could never do 20 miles in a day. You know what I mean? Like not alone 20 miles a day for like a couple weeks and, hundreds of miles. Oh, how'd you do that? Like most people's reaction is kind of like, they look at me like I'm ludicrous. And in my mind, I'm like, good. That means I'm doing something dangerous. And so, but it was like, okay, I've actually hiked a lot before, and like my knee would be really just ungodly sore. And like, it was just like a couple day trip, right? Or like my ankles would get just super sore. Or a lot of people have maybe had their feet, like my feet just get destroyed, and like blisters maybe on a, sore feet or blisters, like two kind of different things. And it's like, there's all these like, oh, like what if you kind of stub your toe and you trip a little bit, and like people have tweaked their leg, and it's like they feel that tweak every step, and it's like that's not going to float when you got to walk 3,000 miles.
Yeah, because that's like every step for, if you generally 2,000 steps a mile or something like that.
You're going up and down mountains,
yeah.
and like
so like you're not going to do that for 3,000 miles, because that's like what, rough math, like 3 million or like 6 million steps or something.
Yeah, so you need to be able to be in good shape to complete something of that extra, even 300 miles. Like it's like if I wanted to do, I would have to do like 20 miles a day, and I wasn't gonna be able to do that if I wasn't in peak state. And so my training constituted in, I would walk like basically 5 to 10. I would try to shoot for like 10 miles a day. I was like literally trying to like get out and go for a walk of that distance at home. And so I'd throw my pack on, and I'd have all my gear packed, and I would have it the proper weight, and I'd have it on and whatnot. So anyways, I'd be doing these little hikes to just train for months, probably like 4 months before or more. And I had researched all this stuff, but one of the things that I found was this guy I discovered on YouTube. His name's, or the channel is Chase Mountains. if you're into wilderness or hiking or you've battled injuries, I highly recommend it because he basically gets into something that I think is fascinating on the topic of how do we complete these, how do we do like a marathon, or how do I do a through hike, or how do I do something like athletic that's a feat like that. And it's like, well, a lot of people talk about getting out and doing like, you know, lifting heavy and training your muscles to get stronger, and that's definitely part of it. But a lot of it's just like, if you're going to run a marathon, you have to run a lot.
Oh yeah.
Get your body used to running. If you're going to do a long distance through hike, like you have to walk a lot. You have to hike a lot. Like with a pack on trail, like what does it feel like? You have to get used to that. Let your body get used to that. And so that's what you do. And there's other strength things you can do, of course. But what I found was like, it's not enough just to do a lot of heavy exercises, because there's all these micro ligaments and muscles that support, and they're supportive muscles in your feet, in your, you know, in your ankles, and along your leg. And if anyone's ever had like I tweaked this, or shin splints, or my knee sore, my hips sore, or like anything, like, and it will kick in and like won't go away. It's like, there's all these muscles in our body, as an overview, there's all these muscles in our body that are working to help stabilize us. And those are the ones that's most susceptible to micro injury and getting tweaked. And they need to be strong enough to actually like help support. And so it's crazy. I would do certain like side glute leg raises and a couple other things, a couple different exercises. And like, I was able to like get rid of my knee pain in like a week or two. Crazy, huh? And, but then doing that over a few months consistently, those exercises, it was like body weight stuff. I was able to do my through hike, and there's a variety of different exercises, but didn't have any knee pain, any knee soreness really, beyond just like needing to massage them a bit, because, you know,
you're still walking.
But no, like, distance, that's sharp pain and something's hurt. No ankle pain. You know, my feet felt terrible, but they got used to it after a bit, and that's just kind of how it goes. But I didn't get any of these injuries, and I was able to like put my maximum effort into and like I was able to train really well and prepare really well. So when I got to the trail, I could go all out according to my plan and do super well and be in just tip top shape. And so it was a phenomenal trip. And you know, there's even some days at the end of the trip where I was, I had just like been basically kind of jogging, frolicking, running for certain parts downhill. Like I was just feeling so good and so smooth and such in a groove up and down these little mountains and weaving. And I had a little spring on my step, man. I had momentum, and I wasn't just like walking.
Was this like towards the end?
This is like one of the last days. And I hit 24 miles, and it was about 9 p.m., 9:30. And I've been hiking in the dark for like maybe an hour and a half already, maybe a couple hours. And I was like, I'm tired of hiking in the dark, which I did like every day. I'd hike in the dark a little bit because I'd just be hiking all day. But I was like, man, if it wasn't dark, I would go for another 8 miles.
Wow. I
was like, and I've been kind of running too. Like I felt in such good shape after training so long, but then doing the trail, and after doing the trail and getting my body used to that, like it felt great. And so it's cool because it's hard, because I've seen a lot of hikers get off trail because of injuries. And I was like, okay, so it's a part of our training in life, I think, when we want to prepare for doing great things, is like there's gonna be little things that are unnoticed. In addition, like I mentioned, I need to do big things, like go for 10-mile hikes like every day or most days. And I needed to do it for like a period of months. I needed to like write out a plan of how I was going to incrementally boost my mileage every week. Like I needed to have this research done. But there's also an element of like some of these little things that even allow my body to be prepared for something like that. And it needs to get done. Otherwise, that was actually the most likely thing to take me off trail, besides just not knowing anything about the strategy or how to, you know what I mean? Like there's big things a bear could take me off trail, but I mean,
a moose,
most likely was actually a micro injury in that scenario. And so it's like, I would have only known that through going on lots of trial hikes, but also doing research on other people.
Yeah, and I suppose, John, you can correct me if this is the case, but like when you're building up all of those little micro muscles in your legs, when you're doing the hikes and whatnot, you don't really necessarily like notice those getting bigger, because they're small muscles. Like it's not like your legs are just huge or anything like that. Like it's just kind of like those things that you know are happening, and you kind of have to do them gradually Is that kind of like what you're saying when it comes to like having to do small things to like prep yourself for being great, but you don't necessarily notice those things happening?
Exactly. That's really good because it's not like I'm in a gym like putting weight on and doing any, like most of these were like I do 25 reps on lifting my legs sideways up and down, pointing my toe down and like focusing a certain part of my glute and like, certain types of leg raise, kind of like calf raises, but it's like totally different. Like I'm bending forward in a way that focuses it on those little muscles below, things like that. Right. And so, yeah, you're not looking and going like, wow, this is toned or strong. It's just, you just feel that compound over time.
Mm-hmm.
And so after, months of that, it was just so clear that I felt good. I had strength and mobility in my, like I had range of motion, kind of like mobility, kind of like I wouldn't be able to move my ankle very much versus having more flexibility or range of motion comfortably.
So you can kind of tell by having a larger range of motion, but other than that,
and
not a whole
a lack of, you don't have weakness. Like there's strength to be able to, you don't feel like there's certain parts of your motion that is range of motion that's just weak.
Yeah. Do you kind of notice that range of motion more like after you've gotten into like a longer hike, and then you're like, oh, this part of my leg doesn't feel too good?
Yeah, I think that
like
was
when you're training.
Like what? Can you rephrase the question?
Like when you're training, doing your shorter hikes before you do the long one, do you kind of notice the gain of like strength and some of the like smaller muscles in the range of motion when you're doing those shorter hikes?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I would notice that over time. I think consistency of doing those exercises over a few months before I really was like, oh, this is obvious. But yeah, no, for sure. I felt great during my training. And that's part of what gave me the confidence to get out on the trail, right?
Uh-huh.
It's like, okay, I've hiked with the packed to the weight. I didn't put food in there. I just like put some rocks or some. I put something that would shift around that weighed the same, and maybe it was like sand or something. But it felt the same. It was packed the way it was. I was wearing like the same clothes, like because I was like, okay, well, I want to make sure I'm not chafing.
Oh yeah,
I wouldn't know that unless I had walked in these clothes for long distances. It's like I don't want to get blisters in these shoes, so like I need to hike in the shoes that I'd be wearing for a considerable distance.
Yeah.
And if I run into any problems, I need to be able to like make those changes or gear swaps. And so like I need to go, I drove up there a couple times and did like a one night or a weekend by myself just to test out some gear and maybe get in the rain or something like that. Like what are different scenarios and like, oh, what do I need to learn for next time? So I wasn't like seeing every scenario for the first time necessarily. There's always something new that comes at you, but the idea is you've had some practice. And it's not a surprise. It doesn't freak you out. So, But yeah, those small hikes, to your point, it was considerably boosting my confidence to know that like, okay, yeah, I can notice myself getting stronger, better. I'm going on these 10 or plus mile hikes like during the day or the week in preparation. My knees aren't getting sore or like hurting. Like that's big time.
Oh yeah. So you're kind of saying that like, you have the big trail, that's your kind of your great goal.
Yeah.
But then you have the little things that are building up to that. And some of the strength along the way, you don't necessarily notice it. Some of it you do. Is that kind of a way that can be like applied to basically becoming great in, do you think, many different aspects of life?
I have thoughts on this, but I actually be curious to hear you answer this one, Adam. If you have thoughts.
I mean, I guess this reminds me of like I used to be like pretty skinny. I'm still skinny, but not as skinny as I used to be. I wasn't really into doing like a lot of like working out. I like ran track in high school and stuff.
Like lifting.
Yeah, not really lifting. I started thinking about lifting more my like junior and senior year because I started doing like a little bit of like throwing discus.
Ooh.
And I'm like, oh, throwing a metal disc into a field, that's kind of fun, and I don't have to like run for like 6 minutes and just be in pain
like in track.
Yeah. So, but it was really actually when I was doing missionary work where I really got into more working out, just because some of the guys that I was on a team that we go out with while doing mission were like very into working out. Like one of them was just like kind of a jock, really into all the sports. One of them was actually a physical trainer. So they're like, we're going to work out. And then like the other guys on the team were like, well, you guys are going to do it, so I guess we're going to do it too, because we don't want to be left out of getting gains. It's kind of
Nice.
like, we don't want them to be like super buff and us just not be buff and like, or like not necessarily feel left out, but we are more like, oh yeah, working out, that's probably a really good idea. That's something that we can kind of like do as a group. So
Yeah.
it's like a lot of those exercises. And I remember starting and feeling like terrible because they're all like a little bit ahead of me as far as like exercise goes. Like I wasn't able to do, like, granted, like we're traveling all the time, so it's not like we're gonna like go find a gym to work out. We're doing like calisthenics and maybe like some workout bands, because workout bands are really light and you can like throw them in a suitcase very easily.
Yeah.
But it was like, this is really hard because I don't feel like I'm doing as much as they are. But then like just staying at it and be like, okay, well, I'll do how much ever I can in the kind of the time that we're working out. And eventually got to the point where I was actually doing like about the same amount as them. And
Yeah.
and like there's some times where we'd work out and I'd be like super sore afterwards. Like some leg workouts, my hamstrings would be like sore for like 3 days. And again, because I'm just like pushing myself super hard, and that was really difficult. But eventually, like my legs got stronger and my upper body got stronger. And then yeah, and it was just really good to be like, okay, like I can feel like I have a stronger base and I can like run around and not be like super tired, and I can feel like I like, you know, have the more mobility, and I'm not like feeling like I'm weak when I'm trying to move stuff or
Right.
and it was like really cool to like notice that, but like it's one of those things that's like more gradual, and then you kind of find yourself being like, wow, I feel pretty good right now.
And that's just how training works, huh?
Yeah.
Like, I think maybe these are the first times we kind of realized that.
Yeah.
That, you know, like we obviously get the gain of having the benefits of the training we put in, but then we realize, oh wow, a lot of things in life just work this way. Like,
Yeah.
like I've been getting up and reading every day, trying to read some books to learn different skills or you know, different things in my business, in my career, and it just in leadership and in communication. You know, obviously we've been sharing a lot of that in the podcast, but and I never really realized that I needed to put in that consistency, or if I did, it was like, you know, I never really had a reward system of that, but it's satisfying to like find something and maybe have that origin story of when you first decided to put the work in and see a result.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people that could be school, but it could be something you haven't even done yet. You know, for me, that through hike, you know, kind of in conclusion, that through hike that I completed I felt so accomplished. You know, it gave me some kind of, for a time in my life where I didn't really feel like I had much purpose or mission, it actually was one of the things that pulled me out of that. It gave me something to like, to research, to get passionate about, to become knowledgeable about, to, you know, feel, to go and do every day and like, and push myself, and like the amount of growth I went through on a physical level, but also just on a, you know, emotional, to be able to handle all that and push myself and just, you know, my own ability to do hard things and have grit. And so I was like, you know, I think every man should train for something like this, and by themselves go into the woods and be like, hey, here you go. See you in a couple weeks. Hope you survive. It's just like, could you do that? You know, could I do that? It's like, it's so satisfying knowing that, like, if I, you know, I don't have kids right now, but like, or a wife, but like when I do have kids and a wife, like I could take them out into the wilderness and care for them and like, you know, have a hatchet, build fires, like shelter, and like, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of that stuff is a little more simple than we have it in our minds, and having people that we can, having mentors or guides that we can follow on the journey. For me, it was like a lot of those YouTubers, or even getting out with some more experienced hikers and just going for some hikes and just learning some tips. But like those little bits of learning and training and consistency over time, like it's like, oh, how do we do that in hiking? It's like, well, a lot of it I just knew because I just hiked so much that I just knew the answer. It's like, oh, well, actually, I know how blisters work, or I know that like I'm not going to get blisters if I do this, or that, or I knew all these tricks because I lived the experience. And so I think that's powerful. It's like, oh, I have to know every single answer. It's like training preps us for a lot of answers, but actually it's more the experience we gain of doing the training. You know what I mean?
That gives us the answers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and it puts us in a perspective to have somebody else that we can learn from or read from, for sure. Not putting that down, but I just say like what would almost be like a 12-month goal or a 6-month goal that like for something physical that as a man I can pick and I can push myself to train for it. And I think that gives all of my exercise more meaning and purpose, but it also clarifies what I should even be doing.
Yeah.
So it's like for a while I was going and lifting heavy a lot at the gym, and I haven't really been doing that lately because I've been going for runs instead to train for my marathon, or doing more leg focused workouts at the gym, strength training. So it's like, it's different, but it's focused. And I think as men, it's like, we're not just saying like, oh, do all these things. It's like, well, a lot of the things we have in our lives, we've picked because they're focused and they help us accomplish something. And so have that be meaningful for you. So that'd be my thoughts would be, if that's something you guys have been thinking about, to research that and consider doing it. Go out and do it. So it's awesome. It'll change your life.
Like the importance of it being like 6 to 12 months is that it is something that you don't necessarily see the results of right away, but something that you have to like train for and gradually get there. It's not like an Instagram reel where it's a guy that's like starts working out and then is like buff in like 30 seconds. But like really what you see there is like him, like, but the thing is how much time it takes for him to get that way. You don't necessarily see that, oh, it took him 6 months to a year or more to like accomplish that. It's just really fast so you get all the views and whatnot. That's not real life. You can't get buff in 30 seconds. Surprise, surprise. But imagine if... Oh,
you mean that product I've been developing? I need to put back on the...
Yeah, you definitely got to get on that. Yeah.
Okay.
So in 6 to 12 months, we'll have a product that...
yeah.
But anyway, guys, imagine if...
The product is called a gym membership.
Yeah. Imagine if a lot of men like actually like set those goals of like 6 months, 12 months, where it's like this goal of... it could be physical. It could be, oh, I want to be able to do a through hike. It could be, oh, I want to be able to like lift this certain amount of weight in the gym. It can be like, I want to be able to dunk a basketball.
Oh yeah.
It could be a lot of different things, but also could be something that is like skill based. Like I want to be able to, build a website. And imagine if we applied this to both like our physical like body, but also like our mind and our business and the work that we did. And just think about like how much more like would get done by all the men in our society if those 6 to 12 month like goals were getting made. And I think it's really easy to kind of pick something that you can probably like get to in 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit more like focused. It's not like, 5 years down the line, it's like, well, maybe sometime this will happen. But 6 to 12 months, like
I think enough time to see results.
Yeah, it's enough time to see results. And I think anyone can kind of pick something to get results and actually see it happen over that amount of time.
Absolutely. And if you love this podcast, share it with a friend to help other men embrace danger and become great. And you've been listening to the Dangerous Man podcast. Join us next time. Until then,
claim your greatness
and stay dangerous.